she was supposed to meet a friend to go play outside after school. But where is Christine Jessup?
The pain is unendurable. The worst part is not knowing.
A nation is gripped by her disappearance.
They were convinced they had the right person at the time, and that's what they went with.
Fiber analysis is not a precise measuring tool. There's a greater risk of misinterpretation.
It takes 21st century investigative technology to finally get close to the real killer.
The advancements into genealogy started to come into play. This takes months, sometimes years, to get the results back. It was a waiting game.
A game that hopefully would bring justice down on the killer and some kind of closure in the tragic Christine Jessup case.
The unsolved ones, we have to stand up
and approach these cases in a way outside the box.
Let the world know, just for those out there that did commit a murder, there are people that are coming after you.
There's just a lot of good people trying to do the right thing.
Because it's something that you have to be passionate about.
Solve this. Bring some peace to the family, at least. Just doing my job.
October 3rd, 1984, Queensville, Ontario, 39 miles north of Toronto. Sometime between 7 and 8 p.m., Janet Jessup calls police to report that her daughter hasn't come home from school yet.
There's no such thing as an Amber Alert in 1984. It's when young Christine Jessup disappears from her home near the largest city in Canada. The search for her grabs the attention of the country.
Queensville, Ontario, Canada. This sleepy village, an hour's drive north of Toronto, is home to about 400 people.
It's the early 80s. Kids are given more freedom. Parents let them go free and play outside, come home when you're ready, even play in a local cemetery.
Janet Jessup and her son Kenny return home from visiting Bob Jessup, who is in jail for misappropriating funds from elderly friends of the family.
When Jeanette Jessup and her son Kenny get home, they expect to see Christine there.
Janet expects to find her 9-year-old daughter Christine, but Christine's not home.
Mother's going to worry, but Jeanette knows Christine had plans to play with her friend Leslie, so she's not worried yet.
To her family, she's known as Chrissy. Chrissy is a spunky, adventurous kid who loves playing outside. She's a vivacious, happy, sensitive kid, and her family says she wouldn't harm a fly. Chrissy loves animals, especially her pet beagle Freckles, and her frog Harold, who she keeps in the basement.
Christine's family says she loves baseball and school, as well as playing with dolls or spending hours at the local playground or nearby cemetery.
Jeanette knows that Christine planned to play with her friend, Leslie Chipman, that day. But as time goes by, she calls her parents, finds that she never met with Leslie.
Police quickly piece together a timeline of the hours leading up to Janet's phone call. Christine gets off the school bus with a plan to meet her friend Leslie at the nearby park around 4 o'clock. It's an exciting day for Christine because the music teacher has handed out recorders, something she can show off to her friends and family. She leaves her backpack, along with the household mail, on the kitchen counter. Christine heads out on her bike to the general store not far away.
A witness tells police that Christine went to a local store and bought gum, sometime between 4 and 4:30.
Janet Jessup tells police they arrive home from visiting her husband in prison at about 4:10 p.m.
The timeline is really important here because there are overlaps where Christine could be really close or she could be long gone. So every minute counts, and people are guessing what time they did or saw something.
3:50. Christine gets off the bus. 4 o'clock. Leslie waits at the park. 4 to 4:30. Christine buys gum. 4:10. Jessups arrive home. After weeks of desperately searching, Christine Jessup is nowhere to be found. Police set up a command center at the local fire hall. Janet relies on the comfort of a family friend, Heather Hoover, until Bob is released from jail on compassionate grounds.
Thanksgiving passes, then Halloween, then Christmas. And still police don't have any answers for this suffering family. The worst part is not knowing. Pain is unendurable.
An hour's drive away, and months later, the answer no one wants to know is discovered. December 31st, 1984, Sunderland, Ontario. Fred Patterson calls for his dog as he walks through the wooded property next to his home. His 2 daughters are with him when they stumble upon a gruesome scene.
He thinks he sees a pile of garbage in this wooded area, which is unusual. He moves closer to inspect and finds it's the body of a young child.
Fred Patterson calls the police.
It's an awful scene. Even the most seasoned police officer is going to be disturbed coming upon it. Some time has passed, decomposition has taken place, and animals have gotten to the body. It's a hard scene to describe.
Not far from the girl's body, police find a recorder with the name Christine Jessup written on it, confirming their fears. They have found Christine Jessup.
Christine's remains are badly decomposed. She has been stabbed multiple times in the chest, some of which are deep enough to sever the vertebrae. Her underwear is found beside her right foot. She has been sexually assaulted and then stabbed to death.
Christine is laid to rest in the cemetery where she used to play, not far from her family home.
The attention of an entire nation is bearing down on them. The family is desperate to know who did this to their little girl.
This case has the attention of a nation and a family desperate for answers. The pressure is on police. Police are going to use every tool at their disposal to find the killer, especially if there's a chance they could strike again.
Ontario police get assistance from their southern neighbors at the FBI, who send criminal profilers north to help develop a possible profile for the man they're after. At the same time, they employ the best forensic tools that they have available.
In 1985, the cutting-edge forensic technology is the study of trace evidence, fibers from fabric and hairs.
Police retrieve a single black hair from Christine's necklace, which may belong to her attacker, along with fibers they believe could be from clothing the attacker wears.
Law enforcement would have collected all of the clothing and a plastic recorder found at the scene. They would also have the autopsy results combined with numerous interviews, and an FBI profile would be developed.
The profile, created by the FBI with all the information provided to them by the regional police, describes a man who is young. He would be known to Christine, so she would trust him enough to go with him. A person who may have had personal problems and who knew there was an opportunity to take Christine while there was no one home.
The profile suggests this person may have already spoken with police and possibly helped in the search to look like they are cooperating and deflect suspicion from themselves. Investigators see a man who may fit the FBI profile in some ways.
With pressure on the police, a suspect emerges, a man who lives just next door.
The more they look at him, the better the evidence seems to fall into place. They're convinced they've got their man.
police zero in on the neighbor, with hopes in finding some answers. His name is Guy Paul Morin. A 3-month search for missing Christine Jessup ends with a nightmarish discovery. Christine's body is discovered in a wooded area, far from home, and brutalized. Ontario police enlist the help of FBI profilers as they work urgently to find Christine Jessup's killer.
It's 1985. The state-of-the-art tool for analyzing trace evidence is a really good microscope.
Police find a hair not belonging to Christine in the necklace she wears, along with fibers that could be from the killer's clothing. But police believe they already have their killer. The Jessup's next-door neighbor, Guy Paul Morin, fits the profile supplied by the FBI of a young man with strange behaviors and low education.
The investigators are constantly under pressure to have answers, to solve the case, to reassure the public that everything is being done, and to bring someone to answer for killing an innocent child. Plus, there's also their own internal pressures as well that are, emotional on them, as well as the investigators wanting to solve the case and find out who's responsible for murdering a child. Like, that's an enormous amount of pressure to place on someone to solve these cases. But at the same time, the pressure is there, but the pressure also motivates them to work and work and work and find the person responsible.
The strategy for investigators is to use interviews and the FBI profile to find persons of interest, then use the physical evidence to confirm their suspicions.
25-year-old Guy Paul Morin is brought in for questioning. He hasn't participated in the searches for Christine and doesn't attend the funeral or wake for her. He generally keeps to himself, fixing things around the house. He strikes police as suspicious.
When police ask Guy Paul Morin about what he thought of Christine, he says she was sweet and innocent. And then he says, but they sometimes grow to be corrupt.
Guy Paul Morin doesn't have a criminal record and doesn't smoke or drink. But police believe he fits the profile and focus their investigation on him. Police discover that Morin had worked his shift at a furniture factory south of Queensville the day Christine disappeared. He punches out at 3:32 p.m. Police determine that the soonest Guy Paul Morin could have been in Queensville is 4:14 p.m.
This doesn't quite fit the timeline police have established, but it is close. Police go back to the Jessups to confirm they returned home at 4:10.
After talking it over with police, the Jessups changed the timing to a general range that makes sense to police.
All those timelines came into place when they were looking at persons of interest or suspects to try and determine why that location and whether or not it would fit a timeline.
Guy Paul Morin fits their profile. And according to their timeline, he had the opportunity. Now all they need is some physical evidence.
At his jazz band's practice, a bandmate says her friend is doing a project on hair analysis for her cosmetics class and asks for samples from everyone in the band.
Everyone in the band consents and offers up a hair sample. But no one knows the friend is an undercover police officer, and all other samples are thrown away.
The lab in Toronto comes back with a report saying the two hairs are macroscopically similar and microscopically consistent.
Along with the hair analysis, red fibers found on Christine's sweater are also reported to be in Guy Paul Morin's car. Police charge Morin with the murder of Christine Jessup. Morin is steadfast in his claim that he is innocent. The defense says that Guy Paul Morin didn't get home to Queensville until well after 5 p.m. on the day of the disappearance, and they explain how the hair and fiber evidence don't hold up.
The hair found in Christine's necklace was decomposed by the time it was analyzed, and basically it was just the same color as Guy Paul Morin's. That's it. The defense also suggests that the red fibers don't necessarily prove that she had been in Guy Paul Morin's car. The fibers may have come from a contaminated lab. That is enough for a jury to return a verdict of not guilty.
The verdict means that police don't have their man. The Jessup family doesn't have justice for Christine, and a whole town continued to live in fear that their child might be next.
Prosecutors appeal on a technicality, and a retrial is granted by the Supreme Court of Canada.
At the second trial, Christine's mother Janet says that after Christine's funeral, she and several others hear a man's voice screaming.
She says the voice belongs to Guy Paul Morin.
This time, the trial lasts 9 months, with more witnesses saying that Morin acted in a guilty manner, all while using the same physical evidence.
This time, Guy Paul Morin is found guilty of first-degree murder. Finally, law enforcement delivers a guilty verdict for Christine Jessup.
For law enforcement, they've done what they can to convict Guy Paul Morin. But they, and the public at large, have a sneaking suspicion that Guy Paul Morin should not be imprisoned.
What you have is statements from people. They didn't have video back then. They didn't have DNA. They didn't have any other fingerprints or anything like that. They had basically circumstantial evidence. The hair, the timelines, the proximity where Christine lived, himself, the way he presented in the interview, the answers he gave. You combine all that together, and it gave the view of he was the one responsible.
The advent of DNA technology could confirm that they've got their killer, or could it lead them down a whole new road? A 9-year-old girl in rural Ontario vanishes without a trace for 3 months in 1984. The murder of 9-year-old Christine Jessup sends shockwaves through North America. Police look to Guy Paul Morin, a quiet neighbor who says strange things, as the prime suspect. They build a case around him that confirms their suspicions.
Guy Paul Morin is found not guilty by a jury, but the Crown prosecutors appeal.
A second trial lasts 9 months, and Guy Paul Morin is finally found guilty of first-degree murder. As Guy Paul Morin heads to prison, there's a growing sentiment that police have convicted an innocent man. In 1995, the Supreme Court of Canada agrees, and a third trial is ordered.
This case is the most expensive case in Canadian history, even before the third trial starts. And it threatens to become even more drawn out as lawyers begin to battle over details for a third time.
But the results of new DNA testing changes everything.
Semen samples are taken from Christine's underwear found at the crime scene. The DNA is compared and analyzed to the samples Guy Paul Morin volunteers.
The DNA testing proves, beyond any doubt, that Guy Palmorand is not guilty. 1995. After serving 18 months in a federal penitentiary for a crime he didn't commit, Guy Palmorand is fully exonerated.
Investigators can't have tunnel vision. Finding your suspect and then collecting evidence to convict can lead to exactly what happens here. A killer escapes justice.
Guy Palmorand and his family go through 10 years of hell. After 3 trials and 18 months in a federal penitentiary, he's finally exonerated in 1995.
They were convinced they had the right person at the time, and that's what they went with. It's unfortunate how it unfolded. I think a lot was learned from that case for investigators all around, talking about tunnel vision and the use of hair as an investigative tool is no longer in play. We don't use that at all anymore, unless it's got a hair follicle on it and there's actual DNA on it.
Guy Palmorand has become collateral damage. Christine Jessup's family still don't know who killed their daughter, and police don't know if that killer struck again.
After more than a decade, the Jessups still don't know who took Christine that fateful day in 1984. An inquest determines that existing biases gave investigators and forensics lab scientists tunnel vision. Their desire to convict Guy Palmorand led them to the wrong conclusions, and even to the fabrication of evidence to support their case.
An undercover officer claims he has a jailhouse confession from one of Morin's cellmates. But that story doesn't hold up to scrutiny. It was made to look like a smoking gun, but there was no confession at all.
When the justice system fixates on Guy Palmorand, they start to collect evidence with the aim of supporting their theory of who did it, instead of letting the evidence lead them to a suspect.
This is a perfect example of tunnel vision and a recipe for a wrongful conviction. Police are under great pressure to find Christine Jessup's killer, and they change the timeline to fit their view of who they think killed her.
Guy Palmorand is awarded $1.25 million in Canadian as compensation, and 119 recommendations are given to change how investigations are conducted in Canada. Police are back at square one.
Investigators reevaluate the evidence gathered in the case and try to approach the case with a wider scope.
Because of the distance, the only possibility is that she was transported by vehicle to that location. And of course, why that location was part of the focus of the investigation as well, and the timeline of how long it would take to get from the Jessup house to that location. And I believe that the person responsible for the murder, the actual person, did have ties to that area in Sunderland where the body was found. He had either a relative or he had a friend that lived in that area or something, so he was familiar with that area.
Due to the semen collected at the scene, they don't need an FBI profiler to tell them they are looking for a man who is a child predator and murderer. He knows that Christine Jessup would be home alone after school that day.
Using the semen samples from Christine's underwear found at the crime scene, investigators begin processing the killer's DNA in order to track him down, with the hope of finally bringing Christine Jessup's killer to justice.
DNA can catch a killer, but it still takes police work. They need to match the killer's DNA with another sample, either taken from Christine's body or from evidence at the crime scene. But at this point, there's no database of criminals to go through. There's also no DNA at the disposal of law enforcement that constitutes a match.
police look again at the profile developed by the FBI. They're looking for a person who Christine trusts, a young loner with some personal problems and a low level of education. The suspect would also have selected the place where Christine's body is found to commit his horrific attack. Using the original case files, all persons of interest go back on the list. A local teen who worked in the graveyard where Christine played and exhibited violent tendencies. A local mechanic who was found scrubbing the inside of a van and disappeared without picking up his last paycheck. A neighborhood youth who carried a knife.
One by one, these leads are exhausted. Wherever possible, DNA samples are taken and compared to the DNA from the semen stain, and suspects are eliminated.
Samples are taken from more than 300 people, each of whom are eliminated from suspicion through DNA testing.
DNA science is very precise and reliable. If you can't find a match, all you can do is wait for more samples to be submitted to that data bank in order for that future comparison.
The case goes cold for another 20 years. 2020. Another advance in technology leads police to a man who had been known to the Jessups all along. Nine-year-old Christine Jessup vanishes without a trace in October 1984. 3 months later, her body is discovered. She's the victim of a vicious sexual assault and murder.
Tunnel vision develops when police are under pressure to identify a killer. That's what happened when they identified Guy Paul Morin.
Finally, after 2 trials and a decade of legal battles, along with 18 months of a sentence being served, the man convicted of Christine Jessup's murder is completely exonerated.
Christine Jessup's murder remained one of the most high-profile investigations in Canada, and tips continue to flow into the cold case unit. They pursued leads, but these leads continued to lead to dead ends.
The case goes cold for more than 20 years, despite police efforts to correct the mistakes they made in the investigation. In 2011, Detective Stacey Gallant takes over the cold case unit of the Toronto Police.
When I took over the cold case unit in Toronto, one of the first tips that came in to me as the new leader in that office was on the Jessup case. And Christine Jessup's mother, Janet, she would often call. She would come to the station and visit, and I'd spend time with her, sit down and chat with her every time she came into town, and anytime she'd call, I'd have conversations with her. And as I said, that was the first case that I got any tip on as now the new lead and running the cold case unit. And for that type of case, it wasn't Toronto's case originally. It happened outside our jurisdiction, but it was through the inquiry that happened after Guy Paul Morin was acquitted, and there was the inquiries that were done. It was then given to Toronto to take over the investigation and have carriage of the investigation moving forward. And over the course of years, the Toronto unit, cold case unit, had been looking at it and reviewing it and following up on information that came in. I would get regular tips coming in on the Jessup case all the time. And anytime there was any media surrounding the Jessup case or Morin or anything that kind of came even close to, or another missing child would happen, there would be tips coming in on the Jessup case about who was responsible, who may have been responsible. And my office, I would have people follow up on those. And generally it was going out and getting DNA samples from, persons of interest or suspects that were named in these tips. And dozens of those came in. That was one aspect of it. The other aspect was going through the case file, which was huge, and looking at who we did not yet have DNA from and trying to see whether or not we could go out and get DNA from those people to eliminate them or include them in as being responsible.
In 2018, the Cold Case Unit of the Toronto Police seized the conviction of the Golden State Killer in California thanks to genetic genealogy. Cold case detectives send a DNA sample to labs in Texas to determine a family tree.
A centimorgan is a measure of the likelihood of your genes being present in another person's genes. Your DNA has about 7,400 centimorgans. Family member will have 50, 25, or 3% of shared centimorgans. Shared centimorgans establishes DNA genealogy, or that likelihood of how someone is related to you.
When test results come back, there are two relatives with only 50 centimorgans each, shared with the killer.
A complete family tree that includes these two people and the killer would include about 33,000 names.
With genealogical data, the Cold Case Unit sets out to find and identify the killer of Christine Jessup.
This is like a needle in a haystack. It's going to take some intensive 21st century police work.
A member of the force, known only as James, sets up a unit working separate from detectives. He enlists the help of retired police officers with an interest in genealogy to help him trace the lineage.
The Cold Case Unit deliberately keeps James and his team separate from the case.
He was a police officer with Toronto. He knew the case. He was working on his own time with genealogy and had an interest in this type of work. So it was a natural fit for him to assist on this. It is an art form because you have to actually study the lineage of people and, first cousin, second cousin, third cousin, twice removed from the mother's side and the father's side, and, all that stuff. It's not a straight line. It's like a tree, really. It's a lot of research and, trying to figure out where that line goes and then who it might be. It could be the son of this person. It could be this person. It could be the grandson of this person, this person, this person. Like, they can give you a range of people that it may be. And then what you have to do as the investigator is you have to go out, you have to find those people and go and somehow get their DNA and check it against your unknown DNA sample.
Over the course of 8 months, James' team works with the Texas lab to whittle down the possibilities until they get somewhat close.
They discover the great-great-grandfather of the killer, a man who lived in Ontario named Henry Hoover, born in 1804.
The lab in Texas then matches the DNA of what they believe is the mother of the killer, using genealogical databases.
By cross-referencing the two likely branches of the family tree, the investigation points them towards two brothers. One of them is Calvin Hoover, who was a friend of the Jessups.
Calvin's wife, Heather Hoover, is a friend of the family who consoles Janet when Christine goes missing. With 4 children of their own, the Hoovers and Jessups got together often for family barbecues and birthdays. Heather and Janet became particularly close.
In 1984, Heather and Calvin Hoover both worked at Eastern Independent Telecom, where Bob Jessup was the lead installer.
Calvin Hoover was the husband of a family friend that the Jessups had long forgotten. Calvin Hoover is 28 years old when he kidnaps, rapes, and murders Christine Jessup. He's a hard drinker and drowning in debt. He suffers from depression and other mental issues.
The Hoovers lived 50 kilometers away from Queensville in Oshawa. Calvin even joined a search party for Christine and remained a family friend long after her killing.
With genetic genealogy working independently from the cold case unit and coming up with a name associated with the case, investigators are confident they have their killer.
What they need is a DNA sample from Calvin Hoover to confirm that he is the person whose semen is found on Christine's underwear.
Despite acquiring his DNA, Calvin Hoover would escape arrest for Christine Jessup's murder. Playful and caring, 9-year-old Christine Jessup goes missing from a village in rural Ontario, Canada, on October 3rd, 1984. When Christine's mother Janet and brother Kenny return home that day, Christine has vanished. Police believe they finally have solved the 1984 kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder of young Christine Jessup. Calvin Hoover, a family friend, becomes the prime suspect in 2020 after genetic genealogy connects him to the crime. Months of painstaking research narrows down the ancestry test results to a specific family tree, and then cross-referenced with the facts police know about the case.
At the time, Calvin Hoover had issues with alcohol addiction and depression, and he knew Christine Jessup would be home alone.
Knowing that Christine's mother and brother would be visiting her father in jail that day, Calvin Hoover gets Christine to come with him. Police then discover Calvin Hoover has a friend not far from where Christine's body is found.
It's likely that Calvin would be familiar with the area because of his dealings with the friend. Police can only speculate where Christine was abducted from and the sequence of events afterwards. They do know that, at some point, the killer and Christine crossed paths on that fateful day.
But Calvin Hoover escapes justice, never to be arrested for Christine's murder. In 2015, Calvin Hoover dies by suicide.
No one can say for sure why Calvin Hoover killed himself. He was clearly troubled, but maybe he knew forensic science would finally catch up to him.
Maybe he knew someone in his family was doing these type of ancestry things and realized that that could be, that could be coming to an end, and it weighed on him maybe. And he took the easy way out. Never to be able to answer the questions that we all have about this case and how it happened and the timeline of things and why, and we'll never know.
The cold case unit acquires 2 vials of Calvin Hoover's blood and uses it to confirm the genetic genealogy.
He wasn't on the National DNA Databank. He hadn't been convicted of any crimes that would have led to a DNA sample being on the databank. But when he committed suicide, there was an autopsy, and for some reason, the coroner's office still had access to the samples that they took upon doing the autopsy of him when he died. So there still was a sample of his DNA in the coroner's office.
After the blood test, the police know the odds of Calvin Hoover not being their killer is 1 in 3 trillion.
While he is never arrested, police inform the public that they finally know who killed Christine Jessup.
As forensic science evolves and changes, so does the investigation into Christine's murder. Fiber analysis, unlike fingerprint and DNA analysis, is not a precise measuring tool. There's a greater risk of misinterpretation of the results. Therefore, it led to the wrong man, Guy Paul Morin. Then the breakthrough of DNA finally sets him free. And our latest breakthrough in forensic science, the use of genealogy and ancestry, leads police to the real killer of Christine Jessup.
There's so many people that went through this file, and I'm sure every one of them would say, you know, how did we miss that? You know, his name was in there, and we knew it. And, you know, I think about the investigators, the original investigators, and, you know, their motivation behind solving it and wanting to solve it, and it must tear at them. But, you know, end result, even though it took this long, I think this case is pretty much a legacy case for a lot of reasons, and it will continue to be, especially here in Canada. This is pretty much the launch pad for this new investigative technique to be used on other cases.
For the Jessup family, knowing that a family friend is the killer brings closure, but little solace. And a message from an old neighbor who was innocently dragged into the public eye. Guy Paul Morin, living in seclusion, sends a message to the Jessups through his lawyer after the Calvin Hoover press conference.
Morin says he is relieved that the Jessups finally have this closure.
When DNA exonerated me in January 1995, I was sure that one day DNA would reveal the real killer, and now it has.
Having the knowledge of who killed Christine doesn't bring her back. However, law enforcement can finally close the case.
But a question still remains for cold case investigators in Ontario.
If Calvin Hoover murders Christine Jessup in 1984 and gets away with it for 3 decades, what else has he done?
Police in Ontario continue to look through DNA evidence to make sure Calvin Hoover's DNA is not present at any other cold case crime scenes from that era.
Could he possibly be responsible for more? Yes. I would say not any of the ones that are currently known, because we would have had that connection already.